Welcome back to the Scarlett Johansson fan podcast.
Woo!
Gentlemen prefer cinephiles.
Woo!
I'm Charlie.
Woo!
That's Erynn.
Woo!
Today we have a guest, one of our favorite collaborators,
And
Daniel
a fantastic actor.
Thrasher, Esquire.
Wow. What an intro. Hey, guys.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an aspiring filmmaker and irregularly working actor. Going to be heading out to LA soon to hopefully work on some films. Just wrapped up my first short. I don't know. Maybe you guys out there might be interested in checking it out at some point if I ever figure out where that gets posted. And I love these two guys. I just starred. Well, I didn't star. I was a person in the ensemble.
He was a star.
I was a star in the ensemble mystery that Erynn just created recently.
Yes.
And that was lovely. It was a great experience. And when it is ready, everybody listening to this should absolutely check that out.
Oh my God,
It's a
great.
you guys can't tell.
Great.
because-
This isn't an interview, though. We're here to talk about...
No. You guys can't tell, but I was actually holding a gun to Thrasher's head while he was saying
Right there. That was,
It was a large caliber, any lesser, and I might have said some unpleasant things.
your check's in the mail.
So, Charlie, now what are we talking about today?
We had this submitted to us by a fan of the show named Daniel Thrasher. he requested we talk about Under the Skin. Why don't you tell us about that, Thrasher?
Oh, man. Well,
I'll give the synopsis in a bit, but just why did you want to discuss Under the Skin?
Under the Skin struck me in a way that few movies ever do. I like surrealist films in general. I'm especially a large fan of David Lynch. And so dreamlike movies, they tend to be in my wheelhouse. I have a great deal of patience for low dialogue. We don't normally see movies this idiosyncratic that come with large budgets and starring big name actors and actresses operating at the top of their game, because Scarlett Johansson, I'm not sure exactly where the dates line up on this, but she had already broken through definitely as a huge A-list actress.
Oh yeah, it was 2013. So
This
she
came
was probably
one year
by...
after the Avengers.
Yeah.
One year after the Avengers, we all knew about her. She had been, I think, probably the most notable sex symbol of the past, 10, 15 years or so for a while. I mean, everybody is aware of who Scarlett Johansson is, and to take on a project this unique, and somewhat startling in some ways, really caught my attention. And the first time I saw the trailer on another A24 Pictures DVD, I believe, I was just struck. I was like, that seems like nothing I have ever watched before. And I was right. And several years later now, it is probably my second favorite film. I don't know. It's a really, really special movie. I don't know if I'd call it a perfect movie. I think we're definitely going to have room to dig into some faults that people find in it. But to me personally, I was just in awe after I watched it. It produced a very powerful, emotional, and intellectual response from me. And it's beautiful. It is just a gorgeous film.
Yes. So to launch into kind of the basic synopsis before we start delving in, I think Letterboxd had the best one in my research. Therefore, I will read it to you now. We're not sponsored.
But we could be. Wink.
We could be.
What up, Letterboxd?
Yeah, what up, Letterboxd? Hey. So it's directed by Jonathan Glazer. Is that his name?
Jonathan Glazer.
So a seductive alien prowls the streets of Glasgow in search of a prey, unsuspecting men who fall under her spell. I think that's just enough so you know what's going on, but not too much.
Yeah, and I mean, we could talk about this movie for probably about 3 hours, giving the basics of this plot, and you all listening, if you have not seen it, would be still, we would still not be giving you the proper impression of what this movie is actually like.
100%. And also, like, just quick note there are some spoilers, but at the same time, like you just said, I almost feel in some ways it's beyond spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
I would still say go out and watch it before you listen to our analysis. Though.
Yeah,
if you can. This
is there are certainly some storytelling moments here that I think deserve to be seen rather than heard about, but the storytelling is so visual. I can think of maybe one scene in this movie where plot is related through dialogue. Otherwise, I would say it is entirely related through the power of image, and I think those images retain their power whether you have heard about them or not.
Yeah.
Because the visual style of this film is as I keep reiterating, utterly unique.
Definitely. I was thinking about what you were saying just a couple minutes ago, where I remember when the trailer for this dropped on YouTube and all of my friends were talking about it at school, because this movie felt like it came out of nowhere, where it was just like, what is this trailer? It looks like Kubrick mixed with like...
I always think of that Ralph the Movie Maker Amazing Spider-Man review.
Oh my god, yes.
Comes in and he's like, did you give Spider-Man a good review?
Oh, if I don't give Spider-Man a good review, then my brother's not going to let me watch Under the Skin. God, yeah. But I remember, well, because I at least knew about it from the internet at that point, I went to go see it probably opening weekend or 1 week later in a mostly empty theater with my dad, and that was pretty interesting. And I said last night while we were watching the movie, I hadn't seen the movie in about 4.5 years, but I still remembered everything that happened, and I remembered all these strong images because they just stick with you really hard.
Oh yeah, sticks in your teeth a little bit.
Under the skin, perhaps.
Oh!
All right, wrap it up. We're done. That's it. That's
the
a
episode.
show.
Thanks for being
That's
with
the
us,
closer.
Thrasher.
That's the closer.
Edit that into the end.
So, Thrasher, what would you like to start?
Okay. Well, a basic breakdown of events, I think, kind of deserves like a bullet point analysis as we go through this. I took excessive notes.
I just heard his little
How
scrawling, and I thought it was part of the sound mixing until about 3/4 of the way through the
Flipping pages. How many pages did you get there, Thrasher?
I got 5.5 pages of notes. Some of them more full than others. Some of them more detailed than others. By the end, I'm only doing like a couple of lines per scene, which kind of plays into the pacing of the movie, but we'll get to that. So, in the opening scene of this film, I think it's fair to say that it's more or less impossible to tell exactly what is going on.
Yeah, we discussed it a little bit, and I read the opening scenes. You see, it looks similar to kind of when you see a planetary setup, but there's there's something going through all of the planets.
I wondered if we were in space when I saw it, and I looked around. There were no stars, I believe, except for something that might have been a star, maybe the sun or something, and then a large white object with sort of a hole through the center of it, and then a black object, which is shiny, is entering it.
I felt I had a very visceral, uncomfortable reaction to it, mainly just because I saw it kind of lending to cinema's eye, because I immediately read it as an optic nerve type of situation where it was a breakdown of an eye. However, I know you had a different reading of it.
Well, in a way, I think that both are probably correct in a way.
They probably could both be synonymous readings.
I think that optics are a huge part of this movie. This is a movie that is very meditative upon the theme of beauty and what physical beauty actually means, and how humans treat physical beauty. So I think eyes are very important to this film. We have several other shots where we'll linger on a shot of an eye with screeching strings in the background for 10 full seconds. And in this first shot, as that black object enters the white eye, it transitions to one. I also think that there's some mildly sexual imagery at play.
Mildly.
Well, in the movie, there's more than mild sexual imagery.
Well, it makes sense too because the movie delves into that imagery a little bit more as
Yes.
it goes along.
And I also, thinking about it last night, kind of came up with a third layer to it. I think that it might have been, in some way, like the assembly of the primary character. I was reaching for a name for a second, but it's really just Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, I don't even think didn't we say at the end that there weren't even
There were not
credits,
there were not
technically?
character names
Yeah.
listed in the credits. So we can talk about her as Scarlett Johansson or the
Correct.
female lead or whatever we
Let's
choose.
just kind of like say she's Scarlett Johansson just for consistency.
It might be the assembly or whatever of the disguise for Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I always interpreted it as. Like, I feel like the abstract imagery and the lack of things you can relate to and images you can recognize that are earthly in it make me think immediately that it's inside whatever this alien craft is that they show right after these lights that are kind of swirling above a building where, you know, it's just sort of a completely alien machination that's going on there. And I think I definitely interpreted it as creating the Scarlett Johansson look because you can hear the vocals of Scarlett Johansson practicing English and words and syllables. And all
And
that.
that sound
that's
design,
true.
man, that like the way it kind of almost comes across as like part of a song at first when you just hear mumbling in the background, like
It
the
reminded me of in Rosemary's Baby, the opening lullaby a lot.
yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's worth noting that the sound design in this movie is stunning.
Oh my god.
It is. It really, really brings you into the moment. And yeah, in that opening scene, to clarify exactly what we're talking about, you can hear in the background Scarlett Johansson practicing English words. At least it seems that way. I think that the plot of this movie in some ways is relatively straightforward, even if it's not completely clear after an initial watch. But there's certainly room for interpretation. So if I sound like I'm speaking out of my ass at any point during this, you know, that's entirely possible.
It's a medical condition.
Comments. Tell me I'm wrong, because I would love to hear your interpretation.
Well, we just all had 3 separate ones, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't think that any of them
Are
No, I think
necessarily
they're
wrong.
Yeah,
all
I'm not
definitely related.
100% like, no, you're wrong. I don't
Yeah.
feel like that at all because I feel like they're all synonymous to the themes
Well,
of
the film connects them through the editing as well, where it cuts hard to the iris and the pupil from the spherical shapes, like just.
You could do a podcast on this whole first opening scene.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
This is welcome back to the 6th installment of our 18-part series on Under the Skin.
And transitioning from there, like I said, we linger on that white orb filling up with black, and then cut to an eyeball. You know, I should have made note of the color, because I'm curious to see if that was Scarlett Johansson's eye. We see
I'm
close up
fairly
of
certain it
her
was
eyes
hazel.
later.
Yeah, it was hazel with
Yeah.
a bit of green in it.
And
Yeah.
that might have been the same color of her eyes later. I didn't make note of that. Interesting fact to check later if y'all get the chance.
Let us know in the comments. Was
Yeah.
it hazel? Was it blue?
Yeah,
Tell us about how it's like Un Chien Andalou by Salvador Dali and Louis
Watch
It is
Buñuel.
not like
Watch
Russian.
this movie.
Take
The
that.
eye
Do it.
cut. The eye cut.
I'm sure you could read it that way.
in any case, you know, we could spend a lot longer on this, but for
Yes.
brevity's sake, from there we cut to a man driving a motorcycle through
Really
the city
fast.
streets really fast.
Really fast.
This guy hauls ass through the city.
I like how that was your note. Wasn't that one of your notes?
Later in
the
the
guy
movie-
is hauling ass.
I mean, he's really fast throughout the rest of this movie. By the end, when we see him driving his motorcycle, my God, I was a little bit uncomfortable because he was driving real fast.
yeah.
In the rain.
Yeah. In this
But I
first
think it
scene,
gives him a
he's just
mythic
rather
quality.
fast.
Yeah, but it gives him like this mythic quality that really enhances his character because
He's very stoic. throughout the
yeah,
course of
he's
it.
the person I know the least about the entire time.
We can glean some snippets of his purpose, but nothing about his character, which I think is kind of the intent.
They give you a little.
Yeah.
Give you enough to think about it.
Well, that's true. I think the last shot of him actually conveys a bit of character, but we'll get to that. And we are drawn in on a close up as he's roaring through these streets of the front of his helmet visor, and I think right from there we kind of get the impression, despite the fact that we can't see this man's face at all, this is a stoic, imposing presence. And I don't know, like, right from there, he kind of freaked me out a little bit. He pulls off to the side of the road and wanders off into the trees. And from there, brings with him a female body that seems limp and lifeless before, I believe, loading it into a van that was already there when he arrived.
I would like to mention that in the helmet scene, the brand on the helmet does say shark, which I thought was interesting during this watch. I got the sense that it was a purposeful choice.
That's entirely possible.
I mean, he's got like that thing on his back that's kind of like a fin. It feels like, that kind of hunter mentality.
This movie is into to predators and predator metaphors and imagery.
He also had a Fruit Loop patch, but I wasn't sure if he was sponsored or no. I'm just kidding.
Wonder Bread.
I will say with the woman,
He's driving
it's really
real fast. He
interesting.
could be a pro.
He honestly is probably a professional, but one thing I want to mention that we could discuss also at the end of the film is I think the woman at the beginning of the film works beautifully to kind of transition into the ending because it seems like this almost Nietzschean cycle of rebirth that's going on. It almost felt a little bit like Mother, where it kind of comes around and it's a similar
that's fair.
situation being reborn, but
That's fair. This film, for the record, might seem fairly accessible to some people the way that we're talking about it. If you watched Mother, you'll be fine. Like, Mother is way more inaccessible than this movie.
Yeah.
I found this movie, like, straight up pleasant compared to Mother, and I actually liked Mother, but it was hard.
It's just similar how it comes around with that
Yeah.
Nietzschean cycle.
Totally. Oh, and I skipped one bit. Before we get onto the motorcycle man, there is some imagery of trees and a flowing river and some snow and stuff in between there. And I like how they tend to juxtapose this more intimidating, mechanical, stark imagery with very more natural, what we would call beautiful, sort of more organic imagery.
Well, that doubles the way you view, or the way the film portrays women also very beautifully, with the juxtaposing of the cityscape versus the organic atmosphere.
I'd agree. Now, within that van, it seems, I think this is within the van, this is open to interpretation, but I think it's implied, we open on an utterly white room. Like, you've seen this before in movies, to convey, like, infinite space and stuff. It is an utterly white room with a darkly lit woman laying on the ground. Obviously the woman, the motorcycle man, which is how he's referred to by most people when discussing this movie, that he had pulled from the side of the road. She is dirty and immobile, and she is being undressed by a nude woman who is Scarlett Johansson. And she is just methodically going about her business after taking a moment to observe this woman. And it is clear that this entire process is very dispassionate. She is going about her business with no concern for what the woman on the ground is feeling. It all feels very odd, and this hooked me immediately. If that first scene didn't, I was like, what in the name of God is going on?
Well, and it's really interesting how I've never seen a film use negative space so well.
Yeah, it's rare. It is definitely rare. And I think scenes like that is where a lot of people compare this to Kubrick. I think I can see that in a bit of the imagery. I think the themes at play are very different than most of what Kubrick explored. But I'll leave that up to people who are more schooled on Kubrick.
I don't know. I'm gonna say, as a film scholar, I think people compare too much to Kubrick and Hitchcock. Like, I don't think everyone is replicating what Kubrick and Hitchcock have done. I don't think it's like it's kind of it's like, oh, that's very Kubrickian. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a symmetrical shot. Like, that doesn't mean they like Kubrick.
But you know the advertisers who saw like Kubrick references were real pumped to get those on the trailer.
It might have even been part of the elevator speech, but I don't know how much of it was like a deliberate directing choice with just a vague influence or directly copying Kubrick for a purpose, you know?
Yeah. In any case, it's about as stunning as any image I ever saw Kubrick put on the screen.
Yeah.
You know, like as far as like immediately startling, oh my God moments, this is right up there with Kubrick's best. Once Scarlett has dressed herself entirely in this other woman's clothing, she is laying there prostrate, and we see a tear roll out of her eye, which Scarlett Johansson views dispassionately and doesn't seem to care. She is, however, fascinated when she reaches down and the woman seems to have an ant crawling on her, and she observes that ant very closely. In a very, very deep close-up, we get to see this ant crawling around on her finger.
For like a visual comparison, it was like that SpongeBob episode where he has the butterfly, and then it like cuts to a close-up of the butterfly, and it's like, insects are so gross.
I know, it had that same kind of effect, which I also think might have been borrowing a little bit from David Lynch's Blue Velvet, with some of the insectile imagery in that.
Well, it holds pretty strong to that insect imagery throughout the skin
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, and insects are predators in their own way. Or at least some are. I don't know anything about insects. Don't listen to me talk about insects and believe I claim any authority.
I was on board and listening, and then you went off track and like denied your point, and I was like, wait a minute.
I don't know. I think if insects are predators, if a lot of them are, then that works. If not, I'm that critic with his head up his ass. But hey.
So Dan, you're an insect expert, right?
Yes, an insectoidologist. Yes.
An inspector.
And I'm an insector gadget. All right. After that, Scarlett Johansson is given the van as the motorcycle man leaves her to her business. From there, she goes to the mall.
She goes to Sephora specifically.
Is that the place?
I don't. That's where she goes.
I didn't pay attention to too many of the brands or anything that were represented in here. Though
It wasn't even a brand thing. I was just like, oh, look, it's Sephora. That was totally a joke.
That's because Erynn goes to Sephora.
It literally has no bearing on the film, except for that she picks up makeup and fur.
Erynn is actually an alien, and she knows what stores they like. So.
You know, I was like, no.
It is a well-known fact that all lovers of the paranormal and extraterrestrial should know that aliens do indeed love Sephora.
Aliens love Sephora and fur.
This is not endorsed by Sephora, by the way.
Well, we could be,
but we could.
Email is open.
Hit us with a comment, Sephora. Anyway, yes, and when she enters that mall, though, the sound of humanity is deafening. They are a throng to her from her perception, And it's unpleasant, honestly. As she's walking through the crowd, it's very subtle, and I'm not sure if these are one of the scenes where people were kind of filmed without really knowing what was going on. I doubt that.
Well,
given the
because
context.
just for context, some of the sequences later on in the film were 100% confirmed. Scarlett Johansson was just driving around Scotland in a van,
just driving,
asking people for directions,
improvising dialogue and trying to talk to young men as she passed, and that is astounding that made it into this movie. That was such a bold choice, and we'll get to that in a moment. But from here, as she's walking through the crowd, I don't know if this was one of those sequences or not. But I did notice several people just turning their head and looking and being like, wow, that's a beautiful woman. And that's the first time, I think, where we get this sense of, like, mild, both objectification, but also a sense of power that it is granting her. Because, obviously, Scarlett Johansson is a beautiful woman in the conventional sense. And this movie is very, very aware of that. The casting of her feels very deliberate. And to most people, her beauty is going to be fairly ideal. And we see that in people's reactions to her right out of the gate. But it is very subtle, and I think I only noticed that this time because I was actively looking for it. But it's there. Then she purchases makeup, and begins to...
Just makeup, a sweater, a fur coat. I think the fur coat's also... I think the fur coat is... I keep equating the two in my head because, I mean, it's just kind of a status / symbol of beauty in a certain way. Yeah. And,
I think that's right. It might also have something to do with, like, kind of the Predator imagery as well.
Well, and I think, like, having a fur coat and having, like, makeup in the way she applies it is... It's a heightened femininity that it just enhances the themes surrounding the women in the film.
And the next sequence, we definitely do get into some of those bits where people are filmed in a multicam setup from her van without their knowledge. I assume they all signed release forms and such after. Yeah. They knew they were going to be
Producers
in this movie.
were there to run after them.
But this was improvised, and it lends a really naturalistic feel to these scenes that some people feel is tonally inconsistent with the rest of the film. And I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand. I think that it feels weird and a little bit jarring, but that actually helped the movie for me. It felt cool that there was this strong contrast between her interacting in a believable way with these other people, and then just how alien her interactions feel with, like, the motorcycle man elsewhere.
But I don't want to kind of deposit a certain theory as to why people feel that way. I think some of that may have to do with, because the scene felt so jarring and interesting to me because I've never seen such an overt female gaze that is comparable to the male gaze in film, but just a woman viewing men as opposed to a man viewing women.
She's sizing them up, man.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that might be a part of the reason why people feel it's totally inconsistent. It's just because it's not something we're traditionally used to in film.
I think that is a very fair reading of that. And certainly throughout the first, I'd say 2/3 of this movie, that's presented pretty strongly. And it is quite clear, I think, from this point on, that she is looking for the right sort of man. She is looking for a man that will give her what she wants. It is unclear at this point exactly what that is.
Yeah. Do you have anything up to now, Charlie? What are your thoughts?
Under the Skin's pretty good, huh?
It's pretty good. The first guy she meets up with, he has this very heavy accent. It was very difficult for me to deal with.
Oh my God,
he seems like just a little bit out of focus to me. It might have been that I was watching this movie without my glasses. But he felt just a little bit fuzzy, which again felt like very natural and like kind of opposed to just how exacting the cinematography is in some of those other sequences. But she seems unsatisfied with him. The first man that she gets to come into the car with her is let go. She seems unsatisfied with the fact that he's just willing to make small talk and be on his way. And then she finds another guy. He seems promising, but after talking to her for a moment, he's called away by a woman, and she drives off without another word to him. They might be implied that that was his wife or girlfriend or something along those lines.
But I think also in some ways these interactions with these men up until this point, I don't necessarily read that she's disappointed in them. I kind of read it as, I read it almost as she's empathetic in a certain way. Because like you'll probably go into in a little bit, like there's definitely a different form of interaction with the man that she finally decides. So would you like to continue?
Well, when they finally... sorry, Charlie. Sorry,
Charlie. I would just say that, like I said before, it seems...
Under the Skin's pretty good.
Under the Skin is a pretty good review. I know you guys said that. A lot of the questioning that she does to these guys, the first one who gets into the van, he's all like, "Oh, you go down the street and there's a roundabout and stadium."
Very, very Scottish.
And she starts talking to him, and he says he's got a place, and she asks if he has a family. He says, "Yeah, I got a family," and then it sort of hard cuts from that to the next one with the other guy who's on the street, and he sort of gets yelled at by a group that he's with. She immediately drives away. So in my mind, it's more like she's looking for men that don't really have connections. More. There's a practical reason for her searching. Certainly, in addition to I think a more thematic meaning to it.
Well, but I mean, isn't the first guy she lets go and lets into the van, isn't he completely alone?
No, he says he's got a family.
Oh, he does. Oh,
I believe so. I think
the guy that she lets into the van the third time that we're about to talk about. He comes in and she's like, "You don't have a girlfriend or anything?" He says, "No, I don't have a girlfriend." She's like, "You don't have a family?"
He's like, "No, but you're pretty hot, Scott."
I live by myself, and you're gorgeous.
Yeah, this next guy, this next dude here.
I just wrote ew. That's what I know.
He pretty quickly gets to talking about her body. And she is happy about this. This is what she wants.
But she's happy in a weird way.
Yes.
Like, it's off-putting from an audience member perspective. But I don't know how much of that is us projecting onto the experience.
Well, for me looking at it, certainly, I was like, oh, this is what you want the first time I saw it. And I kind of knew that this movie was going to have, like, some odd sense of sexuality about it. I didn't know exactly what to expect, though. And... man, it is interesting what does transpire. She leads him back to a place. I don't think we see any of the exterior of it this time. But this man follows her into an utterly black room this time, which seems to have a reflecting floor. That is again, some deeply striking imagery. I don't know if I was as taken by it as I was by that White Room scene, but it was very powerful in its own right. And she begins to walk away from him in a sort of dance that is absolutely hypnotic in the way of... I think it's female praying mantises that, like, dance to entice their mate. And then
insect expert Dan Thrasher.
I know, back to bugs. We brought it back to bugs.
It's like I saw the.
I mean, I've seen documentaries that have bugs in them and stuff. I wouldn't call myself.
I love how this is like a point of like, guys, I know a little bit about bugs. I don't know a lot.
I mean, can we have you back on for our Bugs Life episode?
Oh God. Yeah, but she's like walking away from him, and it is utterly hypnotic, and the music has a lot to do with that. This hunter theme that consistently runs whenever she is actively trying to get somebody here. Man, it is intense. There's some distorted strings on it and stuff. And I'm not sure I've ever heard a soundtrack like it. One might exist, but in my film-going experience, and I like to think that's pretty wide, I've never heard anything like this, and
Honestly,
it fits
I think
the tone
Mother is
perfectly.
the closest, and they're like comparable but very different films.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people who despised Mother who like this also, for the record. If you hated Mother and we were comparing it, still watch Under the Skin.
To watch Under the Skin. Yeah, watch Under the Skin, I would say before Mother and then watch Mother.
Yeah, see if you're ready for...
If you haven't already watched Under the Skin and you're listening to this, then you've messed up already.
Because we are about to hit the spoilers hard, guys.
Oh, yeah, but if Under the Skin makes you very, very, very uncomfortable and you don't want to watch Under the Skin again, probably don't watch Mother.
Don't watch Mother. It takes the... And even thematically, it takes the heavy metaphorical sense on display and brings it to a whole different level.
Guys, just go out and watch Pink Flamingos, huh? Just have a good time.
Get your fun trash out of the way and enjoy yourself.
Incest, blowjobs, eating dog shit. You know what I mean?
Hey man, if there's one thing I like, if there's two things I like, it's Under the Skin and Incest. Like their other native environments, this black room is very stark, and he begins to, as he follows her, as he's entranced by her presence, seep into the ground. He has been taking off his clothes as he follows her, and he is nude as he sort of like wanders after her. I believe her back is turned to him in this scene. I know at least in one of the three.
I don't think she's fully nude in this scene.
She's not.
She gets to the point where she ends up fully nude later on as these keep happening, but
Yes.
she's in this. She's not.
Yes, and he's just trying to get to her. But he leaves a trail of clothes behind him as he disrobes, and he sinks into that reflective floor that it, from his perspective, has just become this sort of like goop. I don't have a better word for it.
It's like Bendy and the Ink Machine ink.
Yeah, it's.
You could have just said ink.
It's inky. It's
We
inky.
We don't have a sponsor.
It's inky goop
Brought
stuff.
to you by Bendy and the Ink Machine. I'm Steve.
But yeah, holy shit, right? Like that scene was crazy. Yeah, like that dude has just been entirely submerged by this goop, and we get a little more context on that later, but primarily it just served to reinforce like, oh, she gobbled him up. She, like, they kind of ate him a little bit in this room. Man, that was weird. Obviously, her intentions for these more lecherous people who come back with her are not great. It is unpleasant for them in some way. Now, after this, after we have first seen that occur, we cut to a happy family on the beach. This is the scene that I think I've seen the most analysis on out of this film. And, whilst I carried away some others more strongly, it does hit you.
I mean, the scene is so emphasized and focused compared to the format of the rest of the film. Like, it feels like, I'm going to say this, but I want to say it's not in a negative way. It feels the most out of place in the rest of the film. However, I think that's a deliberate decision to emphasize the themes that are presented in that sequence.
I'd agree strongly. This happy family is playing on the beach. I don't think we see the child at first, but there's a child present. We see a couple that are out like in the water, and they have a dog with them, like by the shore. And there is a swimmer out there as well. Scarlett Johansson engages him in a dialogue, clearly kind of interested to see if this is like that sort of dude. It's difficult to get a read on whether it would have led to that or not. It didn't strike me like it was going to.
But she still gets him in the end. And I think the important thing that I gravitated to again is that he says he's from the Czech Republic. He's an immigrant. He's just living in a tent on the shore here. He's just sort of like by himself, completely isolated, just there by himself, and she's like, "You're by yourself?" He says, "Yes, I'm by
Yeah,
myself.
I don't got nobody.
I'm just swimming."
And then we hear some yelling because it seems like the dog of that family has been swept out to sea, and the wife or girlfriend. I'm not assuming too much about their lifestyle. But
There's a man, there's a woman, there's a child.
There's a baby and
no.
there's a dog. I don't know. Maybe the man is married to the dog. I don't know.
Don't they say in the radio in the movie that it's a man and wife?
I think yeah, it is a man and wife. All right, we can assume about them. They are a heteronormative family with a child and a dog. They are nuclear.
That's the main theme of it.
Guys, they're family. You know,
They're
like they're just like.
This is a movie about family. You know?
This is a family movie.
But really quick to discuss, I think this is a good point to bring it up. This theme of loneliness and being, an emphasis on being alone is really interesting, especially with how it plays into Scarlett Johansson's character and the full arc that she goes through when it gets towards the end of the film. So I just want to bring that up now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are certainly a lot of lonely people in this film that reinforce that.
Mm-hmm.
So the woman, the wife, has dived into the water to try and help this dog, but it is clear pretty quickly that those waves are getting intense. And they're intense enough that, like, I was a little bit nervous watching it. I'm assuming that there were professionals on hand to help them, but, you know, this was one of those ones that put a knot in my stomach a little bit.
Well, honestly, it was probably on like a soundstage or something.
Yeah.
It was probably not.
I don't think it was on a soundstage.
You know,
it was pretty beachy.
They were next to big rocks on the beach there.
But I mean, all those like just like coming from my evidence for my argument is, I mean, the way it's framed, you don't see the beach, you just see the rocks in the sand in the water. So
if it was a soundstage,
it's so
Jonathan
scary.
Glazer, you made a real good soundstage. You had me fooled. And the man dives in after his wife, and then he is struggling and freaking out, and so the swimmer goes after the man, or the woman, or probably whoever he can get to. But I think it's clear after a few moments of this, as Scarlett Johansson watches on this happening, having no desire to help at all, that this is going bad, and we do not see the dog or the wife again. We do see an absolutely exhausted swimmer pulling the man back out to shore. He is lying face down. That was a brutal, trying experience for him, and the man rushes back out into the sea. The man whom the swimmer has just pulled off rushes back out to sea, almost surely to die. There's almost no way that he did anything to help.
Well, his wife pretty much disappears. Like, she's gone. She gets close to those rocks, and you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
But during this, there's a baby screaming in the background because they have their child up on the beach.
We begin to hear that child, which I think is our first experience with the child. We hear that crying and yelling. And over the course of that, as the swimmer is lying face down, Scarlett Johansson approaches him, observes him fairly impassively, and then in the first act of emotion we see from her in this film that I registered, she grabs a good, like, murdery looking rock.
She grabs a murder-sized rock.
It's a murderous
exact
stone, and she gives him one good clean club on the back of the head.
Just grabs some haggis. Whacks him.
This movie's in Scotland.
Grabs the bagpipes and smacks him.
And of course the swimmer was Sean Connery. That's not true.
I like how serious you said that. For like a half a second, I was like, "Yup, he was."
That was him.
What are you doing,
I
Charlotte?
believe you.
Also, quick, just a heads up. So, just at this breaking point, if we're at like 3:30-ish and you guys still want to keep going, I'm gonna exit the episode and then you guys can just keep going.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay.
In 15 minutes?
You're throwing great, Scarlett.
Scarlett, is that a rock you've shown to me?
But yes, She clubs this man on the back of the head real hard, and then starts dragging him across the beach, hauling him towards the van. And
The whole time the baby's screaming.
Yeah, this baby is screaming its head off, and it's disturbing, man. And she gets him loaded up in there. He seems to be kind of like moving around in the seatbelt she has him propped up in a little bit as she's driving off. But he is real messed up. And she just leaves that small child. In a moment later, we see the motorcycle man coming back to the beach to collect the evidence that Czech swimmer left, gathering up his things and whatnot, trying to like cover up the evidence. And he sort of impassively walks by that baby. I don't think he even looks at it, as the baby continues to look very sad and very alone.
It's just screaming and there's snot all over the
That
baby.
is
It's
that is
horrible.
that is the scene that
It's
definitely like got me the most. I just felt like such a pit in my
You just
heart.
feel so sick.
Yeah,
It's dark and it looks extremely cold, and the baby's just moving around, looking around in
just
circles,
looking for something.
trying to stand, and it's just sitting there crying so hard. And you know that the baby's just gonna sit out there and starve and freeze to death at like the
baby is
same
not gonna
time.
And then the
Clean
baby
death.
just disappears, which is really interesting because you don't know. I mean, it's very open-ended as to whether or not the man also cleaned up the baby as evidence.
Yeah, we don't see that, but I don't know. The baby was attached to the family, which the motorcycle man did not seem interested in cleaning up. He seemed interested in cleaning up the Czech swimmer's things because that was who she abducted. Whew. And we're running long talking about a lot of this, but this first movie, the first like half of the movie, I think has more to read into. I'm sure this will pick up along the way. In the next shot, we cut to her back in the van, and in the car next to her, a baby is crying. She seems.
It's a different baby.
It's a different baby.
It's a different baby.
It's not the same baby.
Heads up.
There's multiple crying babies in this film.
There's a lot of
Yes.
babies.
Trigger warning, crying babies.
If that is your trigger, this is.
It is
the film.
mine. I mean, I was very disturbed.
But yeah, crying baby, and she seems like weirdly off-put by this. She feels like that's a little unpleasant.
Something's getting
Where's
there's a
that child's
connection
mother?
being drawn.
Yeah, and as she continues to drive around after that, I don't know, maybe it was the score, but I felt like the van was grinding its gears as it was driving in a way that was like almost reminiscent of the same theme.
Well, it felt like they got those shots and then used that for the theme.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I kind of read the.
In any case, sound design in this movie is great, as we've said. And then, next up, she's walking around, and she steps out of the van, and a group of girls outside of a nightclub drag her inside of it. And they
Yes.
are in a throng once again.
But she
They're
does notice a
shouting
man going
indistinctly.
in.
Yeah, she was
She's
following a guy.
following a guy. and
She
then
was following a guy inside.
She was gonna bail once he walked into the club, but then this group of ladies comes by and they're like, "Hey!" and they like push her in with them.
Only nothing as distinct as hey. It's like the mall again. They're a throng. They're like a horde. It's just like overtaking her and like bringing her along. Like, hey, you look fun.
It should be
Yeah,
said that
true.
the nightclub culture in Scotland is a lot more intense and ubiquitous than in America. They were really big into the house music scene, and they still have lots of clubs like that. So people get into it like that.
I actually had like kind of an internet friend from online gaming that was from Scotland, and he actually kind of he said that it was like that, and club life in Scotland was nuts.
Yeah, definitely.
That's so scary. I'm like, what?
I mean, that's why so much of train spotting takes place in those clubs.
Yeah.
Like they just go there all of them all the time.
Yeah, but she's having a difficult time getting her bearings in this club. It is real loud. It is throbbing. Everybody's moving. indistinctly. It's freaky. There's
It's
strobe lights.
Yeah, and everything's like tinted a weird color, like pinkish.
She does not like it.
Yeah.
They're playing Darude Sandstorm. It's
They were playing Sandstorm, the most club song that you could play. It was like, this is like, it was just to really reinforce, like, hey, humans, they basic.
Humans are the worst.
Humans, man.
I wish I had never rolled
These
up to this human house
cannibalistic
party.
aliens dressed as humans are way better, right?
And,
Oh no.
and so she sprints downstairs to another level of this club with quieter music and completely red lights. There may be something to read into that. I kind of felt like it was a club with red lights.
I think it's just a club with red lights.
Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes-
red is the color of both sex
Sometimes
and
a banana is just a
violet.
banana.
Ah, yes. Yes, you're right.
You're-
Good
you're-
commentary.
You'll recall in Vertigo the scene where Jimmy Stewart first sees Kim Newberg. The entire room is red.
Shut your mouth. I'm just
Oh.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
As Charlie shuts his mouth, a man approaches Scarlett Johansson, and he pretty clearly. We swear on this, right? This is the swearing video, or do we want to censor it?
Aaron didn't want swears, but we've already sworn, so
You were saying good swears earlier. What
All right.
swear are you thinking?
Well, this guy clearly
say it.
wants
He
to
wants-
aggressively fuck her.
he wants the F her in her A.
Yeah, this guy he really wants to have sex with Scarlett Johansson.
He sees her, he like throws his drink, he runs after her, and he's like, man, you're just so
This is-
gorgeous.
this
I'm
is-
alone, you're alone, we're alone.
Yeah, this is like
This is an
this
exaggeration.
is an unpleasant man.
But at this point, I would want to also.
drink.
I will have to exit this podcast at some point, and Charlie and Thrasher will have to take over this grand duty, and I will leave.
We'll do our
However,
best.
I really want to say one thing about all these interactions she has with the men, and especially at this point. So it's very similar to Hanukkah's Funny Games, because there's nothing inherently weird about how she's approaching these men or how she's discussing with them. If you were in the situation, you probably wouldn't pick up on anything weird happening because it's so polite and perfectly natural and normal.
Yeah. It feels like
It's normal until it's not.
it feels like typical human dialogue in a lot of ways, which, and especially in this case, is kind of disturbing all on its own.
Yes.
We have the benefit of seeing each interaction that she goes through and knowing the steps she goes through, and also having that transient string music that just just like you from the beginning. I feel like with the music you get a sense that everything is off,
Yeah.
and it just sort of it shapes your perception of what's going on. But
And up
it's
till now,
true,
even
they
the
wouldn't
guys
know.
who've like treated her with respect in some fashion, you get the sense that they're just like really trying hard not to stare at her body.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the guys who
Yeah.
are doing their best to be good guys are having a hard time with it. And
Yeah.
and
I think that plays in a lot to the themes.
yeah.
Very
It's like
beautifully.
me and Aaron.
What?
I have a hard time not just looking at Aaron all the time.
Oh my god, I thought he was like, I read that
Hey.
completely different. I read that as, man, it's just so hard to be a good guy. And I'm like, I share a bed with you.
It's just so hard not
You
to try
just
and
immediately
aggressively have
read me
sex
as
with
the-
Scarlett Johansson.
I leapt at the screen, I broke our TV, I already apologized 3 times. I apologized 3 times since Aaron's still mad at me.
Yes, well, if it must be edited out, though, the man would very much like to have sexual relations.
I think I'll just leave it.
All
It's
right.
okay. But I am going to exit the podcast at this moment in time.
Most unorthodox.
It was wonderful and lovely
Absolutely.
working with you,
Great
Thrasher.
working with you, too.
guys take all the time with me. Talk about this for another 3 hours. I don't care.
It's probably gonna happen.
At this pace. All right, bye, Eric.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I can't stay longer.
No, you're fine.
I think it's been great so
You're
far.
a lovely, beautiful woman. Very intelligent. We respect you a lot.
I'm just like,
She's just got a lot of meetings.
I just wish I had canceled the meeting. I'm kicking myself right now.
It's all good.
You're like, we'll be able to knock this out in like an hour.
I was like, we can do it, and then I was like, no.
Nope, I guess not.
Best planning on
This
your
movie
part.
has a lot to
This movie
dissect.
is so good. Yeah, I'm really, really glad. I'm glad I said the large things I wanted to say, so I was very excited about that. I will hurry.
Hope you enjoy the rest of it when you get around to listening.
I'm so excited. I edit them, so
Yeah. I'm assuming all of this is probably gonna be edited.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do a big
It's gonna be raw. It's gonna be the whole thing.
This is the raw part audience.
But yeah, I'm so sorry, guys. Again, I'm super sorry that I had
it's
to
all
exit.
good.
No, we just keep real, you know.
Yeah.
Tell Haley I said hi.
Oh, of course.
I love her score. I literally
She's been loving
cried at
it.
one of them.
Oh, Sadison.
Oh my god, yeah.
Which is the greatest name I've ever heard.
Sadison.
Oh yeah, it's
Sadison
sad.
is a very
Let me
sad
tell ya.
song.
Sadison down.
I just hope I don't let Haley down with the visuals. I hope she's not like,
Oh, no.
God, okay.
Yeah, the movie looks great from what I've seen of the footage.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And then we're shooting the rest on Sunday. Whoop whoop whoop. Okay, goodbye everybody.
All right, bye, Erynn.
Love you.
Do a wonderful time.
We will.
You guys won't let me down.
No.
I love you too. Also, cursing is free. Do.
Oh hell yeah!
Now
This is unchained.
we off the boobs.
Boopy.
Welcome the fuck back to Under the Fucking Skin. We're gonna fuck shit up.
I'm just gonna cut Charlie's dialogue. I'm gonna cut all the curses out of it, and it's gonna sound like he's a robot.
Welcome to.
I just want you
Under the Skin.
to edit that and put it at the beginning of the podcast.
Welcome the fuck back to Under the Skin. Okay, bye guys.
Hi, Dad. Fuck Under the Skin.
All right. Well, we're back.
So, guy that she followed to the nightclub and she
Yes.
gets swept in. He's the guy that approaches her to aggressively fuck her
Yes,
by
he
offering to
really-
buy her a drink.
Well, we don't know if he wants to aggressively fuck her.
That's
we know
what
he
you said.
aggressively wants to fuck
Quoting
her.
bug expert Daniel Thrasher from earlier.
From my experience dealing with South African cockroaches, I can discern that his behavior is
They
pretty aggressively
aggressively
sexual.
After they buy her
I don't
some
know
drink.
how he wanted to fuck her. I don't know the degree to which.
It should be noted that each of the victims that we see in the beginning, besides the last one that she lets go, they are completely erect while they're walking.
This is true. These guys, we see them in the nude. That plays into the female gaze that Erynn was discussing earlier. And yes, they are erect. This movie does not shy away from either male or female full frontal nudity. That is an aspect of this.
It doesn't tend to linger or really sexualize like the organs or anything. It's just sort of matter of fact.
While the people in this movie objectify, and they do it hard, I never got the sense that the director or the camera was complicit in exploitative or objectifying behavior. And that made the movie a lot better for me. The fact that the camera feels fairly neutral as far as like the exploitative gaze goes.
Sure. Well, like when a movie does that even satirically, it's really hard to suss out what is intentional and what is not. And at least with Under the Skin, it's very firmly telling you these are the themes, this is what's happening. The camera is a very stark, locked down, naturalistic, and very it's just sort of very matter-of-factly showing you these images instead of trying to add more style to the movements in a verbose way. It is more very stationary most of the time and very practical, I guess.
And in the next part, we kind of knew where this was going. It is back to the black room, and this time he begins it by dancing. This guy is very excited, and he's pretty pumped. He is utterly entranced by her as she walks away. And I do remember, I think for a fact, that she was... No, I don't remember for a fact. I think that this was the guy that she had her back turned to as she was walking away. It might be the exact opposite of that.
I'm pretty sure you are correct. This is one where she continues to walk, forward in front of him, and the thing that
she's not trying as hard as with the other guy.
The thing that separates, well, she doesn't have to. The thing that separates this from the initial exploitation or whatever is that we see the nightclub guy's entire journey into the Black Void, where we follow him seeping into the muck or what have you, and you see his body go all the way down inside, and he looks up and he can see her walking on the surface away.
She does look down, I think, but I think that's to actually look at her own reflection instead of being curious about what's going on with him. Well, I do not think she gives a damn.
Well, I don't think you can see through that floor, so...
It's reflective.
So it's all completely dark blue down there, and he's floating, and you can see like the air bubbles forming on his face. He's clearly not breathing.
It's horrifying immediately. I was shocked.
Looks down across, and there's the shell of either the Czech Republic man or the initial...
It's difficult to tell. He is a bit... his skin is very loose. Yeah. And it's a bit grotesque.
One of the most disturbing scenes for sure.
Absolutely. They float together, and the new man, who she had just entranced down here from the nightclub, takes his hand. I don't know. It's difficult for me to discern what was meant by that. It lingers on it enough that I'm sure Jonathan Glazer had a point to communicate there.
Well, at the very least, they're both in the same trapped situation. And
that is true.
It's a show of you're trapped down here naked, I'm trapped down here naked. Just kind of holding somebody else's hand is at least comforting in that completely alien void situation.
And as horrifying of a situation as I could ever fathom.
For sure. And so grabs the hand, and then in one of the most shocking and interesting shots in the whole movie, he collapses in on his own body. The man that's already there with the loose skin, not the nightclub guy.
Yeah.
Collapses in, and the skin is just left behind. There's nothing inside anymore, and the skin just kind of torts and swirls.
Yeah, this remaining skin and everything that was under the skin is gone now. He floats around, and he looked either to me like a peeled scab or a used condom wrapper.
And definitely both.
Yeah. Oh, God. It was...
real sexy.
Oh, yes. I was aroused. Hello?
Do you have this room?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Sorry.
Okay. No, don't worry about it.
Alright, cool. Yeah. So what's the...
Alright, well, Erynn, just so you know, the sound quality is probably a lot worse now because we got kicked out of the study room and this was the only one we could find, and there's an air vent going, so I just put a cardboard box around the microphone, so this is going to be super DIY, in your face, coming at you. Fuckfest number 2018. Bam, 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 do 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 do.
We've had 2018 Fuckfests.
I mean,
Fuckfest number 2018.
Listen, that's just this year as well.
Oh God.
So, horrifying image, used condom was where we were at.
Yeah. Sorry for the break in the action, folks. We got kicked out of the room we were in. If this sounds weird, I apologize.
Send your letters of complaint to idon'tgivashit@gmail.com.
We've been given more permission to swear, just so you know.
I have all the power now.
Unlimited power. Okay, so... yeah, that whole thing is gross and weird and, oh man, it is powerful imagery. And what I assume to be his guts, his fluids and his organs and bones and everything, is on what looks like a conveyor belt to hell.
You have a very narrow view of what it is. You pretty much just have this little red window that's sort of rectangular shaped, and this long conveyor belt that runs from the camera to that shape with all of this churned up guts and fluids and ground innards and everything, and it all gets sucked up into this spot, and then that's all you can see is just the red window.
And it's an immediately horrifying image. I'm not trying to make this out to be like a horror film, though. That like we might have even oversold like just how grotesque that actually was. But
It's
in the
pretty
moment,
horrific.
in the moment, I was shocked and a little bit panicked. But I also, I don't know. I think someone with a reasonably strong constitution could watch this movie.
If the imagery doesn't get you, I think that the themes are equally horrifying throughout the film.
Yes. After that, she is back in the van, and she seems to be just sort of considering as she looks out. She looks less impassive to me than she did before. And they're in a traffic jam, and she is sent flowers from somebody else several cars over in the traffic jam by this little dude just running around, I guess, selling flowers to people in the traffic jam.
Yeah.
And they have the blood of that man on them. He seemed to have cut his hand pretty intensely while he was holding them.
Yeah, with the thorns or something.
Well, that's a whole lot of metaphor right there that I guess might be worth digging into, but it's almost a little blatant compared to some of the rest of the stuff in the movie.
Sure.
She is hanging out, listening to a news broadcast that relates the finding of the beach guy's body, and that is where we find out that he indeed did have a wife and child.
They have not been found, apparently.
Yes, the wife, child, and dog. If you were worried about that dog from earlier, they've gone missing, and I'm sure dead. I'm sorry for the dog and the baby and the woman. And I don't know. I think I detected some like sense of heavy breathing from her right there. She seemed, and this is a very delicate performance right here. Scarlett Johansson modulates this perfectly, and I'll get into more of her performance later, but suffice to say, it is utterly stunning, and just small details like her seeming just ever so mildly visibly uncomfortable in there is huge.
You just sort of start to see her recognizing her impact on people's lives and getting a sense for like the connections between people on Earth, I suppose.
The next scene we get with her bringing another guy back to that space plays much more quickly. We get less lead up to it. I think that she is kind of feeling less into it, but the big takeaway from that scene, if you weren't sure she was an alien before, I think her just sort of driving through and him being like, doesn't the sun hurt your eyes? Like, as the huge glare is coming in through the window, and her just continuing to drive, and her just continuing without any problem. I don't know, that I think is pretty much the nail in the coffin of any other theory that she's not an alien.
And she leads him up to the door of this house. It's a very decrepit house. It's a different location for the black room, and he seems taken aback by it. He's the first one to sort of notice.
I think it's the first time we've seen the exterior.
Yeah, all of this surroundings, and it's
decrepit.
Sure, and he goes in somewhat not sure. The other victims seem to be pretty confident in going inside. He's the first one that does not seem very sure about what's going on. And in that scene, in the Black Void again, we get our first glimpse of what the alien form truly is, where there's this stark, shiny black figure, very thin and angular, just standing off to the side, and it sort of it crossfades and melts with the shot of Scarlett Johansson, who's in the Black Void, pulling the victim in.
While I have said before that I think that the plot of this movie is in some ways fairly clear, though open to interpretation in some ways, this is one of the few times where I was a bit puzzled over my own interpretation. And at that point, our view of that alien form is a bit vague. We don't get an exact idea of what it is, except that it is somewhat reflective. I don't know whether that was her form that we were being presented with in sort of a dreamlike manner using that editing. I don't know if that was the motorcycle man. I don't know if that was a third undisguised alien. But in any case, compelling imagery.
It's just cluing you in for what's going on. Piece by piece, it gives you little bits of what the underpinnings of this operation are kind of like.
And it doesn't linger as long on the action right there. We've seen it twice now. I think Jonathan Glazer had sort of the sense that if we overused it with these guys that we're not sympathetic towards, it might kind of lose its power. And so it lingers on that for the exact right amount of time. And then it cuts to her reapplying her lipstick as Motorcycle Man observes her. And if my reading is correct, he was doing it for signs of weakness. He was trying to see, like, hey, are you breaking a little bit? Are you starting to question what we're doing? And right there, I think you get your first clues about what might have happened to the previous woman whose clothes Scarlett Johansson was donning at the beginning of the film.
Yes, I would also say that I subscribe to the theory that the eyes give it away when it comes to the aliens. So there's a sort of phenomenon that seems to go on throughout the course of the film where he looks very intensely into her eyes more than anything else, and that's the marker for seeing what's going on. And later, when she sort of becomes completely sympathetic to the humans, she looks in the mirror and you can see very clear glints in her eyes that have been placed there that before her eyes were very shadowed and very given dark black color values to indicate what's going on behind the eyes. But as more light appears in the eyes and more glistens and more reflective light, the more human they become. And I think that's a danger that all the agents that go out to get the human test subjects
there's a lot of lore
source.
that we could try and puzzle out here if we wanted to.
All I know is what the book is about, because the book that it's
There's a book, if you didn't know.
The book that it's based on is a lot more explanation heavy. It explains everything that's going on with the operation.
Similar to almost getting back to overstating the relationship to Kubrick, a bit similar to how 2001 functioned with the Arthur C. Clarke novel.
A bit like that, yes. In the book, all the characters have names, I believe, and the main character explicitly says that the humans are used as a food source because the novel is sort of a meditation on the commodification of meat and animals, actually, whereas the film is a lot more interested in sexuality and
This
and stuff.
This is another one of those things like The Shining, where it's an excellent movie, but I would understand an author being upset at authorial intent being kind of usurped by the film.
It is a wholly different beast, but if we want to go based on that, we could say that the humans are being used as food, but I think it's much more metaphoric than that in the film.
In the next scene, she is just walking along on the street, and the first thing I notice about that, because in some ways it's just kind of a reinforcement scene for like everything else that we've been seeing in her perception of people, but the sound as she's walking through all of these people is far less aggressive. When we were at the mall, when we were at the nightclub, and she would see all these people, it struck me as overwhelming. Like, they were overwhelming her. And she couldn't make any sense of it. And this, it's far less oppressive. She trips and falls, and several people go to help her up. And it's pretty obvious, I think, what that means to her perception.
Yeah.
She tries to just continue on, but
It should also
shaken.
be said that whereas she pretty much 100% of the time just drives around in the van to pick up people. Before that, in that scene, she decides to go out and walk on the street instead, and is therefore more involved in the daily goings on of rather than just being in the crowded mall or crowded nightclub. It's a more pedestrian experience and a more involved one, I suppose.
And then we see a montage of just sort of regular people going about their lives. And we have not seen much of people behaving in sort of like daytime settings as people are normally wont to do. We have typically seen people in their reaction to the immediate physical beauty of Scarlett Johansson and their reactions to that. Seeing them just go about life immediately, I think we have empathy and relation to these people, just like having transactions and stuff and going about their typical non-predatory lives.
Yeah, that's one of my actual favorite sequences in the entire film as well, because they use this technique of crossfading all the images over each other, this incredibly vast overlay of like probably up to 50 different shots, and they all have this honey gold glow to them where it just feels so warm and inviting, and then Scarlett Johansson's face sort of crops up in the middle of it and becomes sort of the focus and blending in with all these different bodies and faces. It's just like a very warm and beautiful image, in my opinion.
But then we cut back immediately from that to the next scene wherein she is harassed from within her van by a group of hoodlums. I mean, I think it's fair to imply that they are like harassing her and trying to get her out of her van because she's a beautiful woman and all the scary implications thereof.
Smashing bottles and like just
man, those guys were scary. They were only on screen for like 20 seconds, but man, that didn't freak me out a little bit. She drives away from them.
As one would.
Yes. The next person she encounters after that is a man with some fairly strong facial deformities. It is worth stating that these were not digitally or cosmetically created. They cast a man who is actually dealing with some disabilities. I read a couple interviews from him about the making of the movie. He seemed like a really cool guy, and I loved that there was the opportunity for him to get the chance to act in such a notable film.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting topic too, because like there's arguments there for casting somebody because of their face being exploitative. And that's an argument that I'd be happy to hear people make. Though this is a film specifically that cast Scarlett Johansson, I am sure, because of her status as a sex symbol, because of her renowned physical beauty. And so, because it is so meditative upon those themes in the first place, the casting really, really makes sense.
I will say, I think he gives one of the strongest performances in
he's
the
great,
film.
man.
Like, besides Scarlett Johansson, I'd say he's my favorite actor because he gives such a gentle, human touch to it, because you could easily just throw somebody in makeup or just stunt cast somebody who has these sort of physical deformities and just
he's good.
Throw them on there. But I'm certain that they worked with him to craft this dialogue that he says very naturalistically, where, you know, he just very starkly says, I go at night because people are afraid of me, they're ignorant, and that's it. Like, he just gives a very human, well-rounded perspective.
He's so clearly agonizingly lonely.
But, you know, it feels a lot like he's a realist about the whole thing.
He gets it.
It's a very sort of tragic but sweet dynamic that they have, where she is even encouraging to him about, you know, the embracing sexuality with her in this moment, despite them being strangers. She's just like, touch my face, touch my neck. She smiles at him, and
he is shocked at the degree to which she is interested in him immediately, and it is tragic and touching.
I mean, it's definitely a standout of the film to me.
Mm-hmm.
Where in my head I would even write like a whole movie where it's just a love story between an alien and a deformed man.
having just seen The Shape of Water recently in the last like month or so.
Beautiful.
That is also a stunning film. Watch it if you haven't.
Watch everything.
Yeah, like, but if you don't get to watch anything else, watch Under the Skin and The Shape of Water.
And Phantom Thread, by the way, just saw it.
He liked that bunch. I haven't seen it yet. Erynn also loved it. I think she said it was one of her favorite films.
She did. She said that it was either tied with her favorite or her second favorite film of all time.
Yeah.
And that's pretty wild. That's some high praise.
But the theme I detected there that I drew. Let me say that again. The line that I drew there to The Shape of Water was that she does not understand that he's disfigured, it seems. Like, she's alien enough that I don't think, despite the fact that she has absorbed, obviously, what is most attractive to humans, what we, like, imagine sexiness to be, she doesn't really get that he's entirely unsexy by those same standards.
I feel that this is my interpretation, but I feel that she does understand, and that she is sort of going after this in a different way that she's had to deal with before. Because she says things like, "You have very beautiful hands," and,
yes.
and you know, she talks to him about how he's never been with anyone, and she. I feel like there's a sense of understanding about the whole thing because they have a conversation about it. But the difference is that she's still somewhat trying to manipulate him, but at the same time, she's almost being manipulated the other way because she's understanding now, you know, this complexity to human existence.
And the Hunter theme finally plays, as despite all of his nervous reluctance, he seems hooked. He will go along with her, and in just a devastatingly sad little moment, we have a close up of him pinching himself on the hand to make sure he is not dreaming. Oh, and that hurt a little bit. Then we cut to the black room. He is more hesitant still, or I guess once again. I think because he is less entranced by her sheer physical beauty enough so that he can kind of recognize that this situation is weird. She has such a hypnotic power over these other guys who only want her body and would follow her into anything to get it.
He's the only one that actually has a conversation with her in the black room as well, where they have a small dialogue about how he says that it feels like they're dreaming, and she says that yes, that they're both in a dream.
And this man she locks eyes with as she's walking backwards, entrancing him and pulling him forward towards the black goopy goop.
The first time that she gets completely nude in the black room.
Yes, and I'm sure that was the intent, that there she is opening up more, and he sinks into the goop, and as she's leaving from that, she looks at herself in a mirror, observing herself. This is really the turning point of the film. She looks over after taking a good 2 minutes, I think, to really observe her form. A fly is seen trapped behind a glass pane, which I feel like that had to be serendipity that was happening when they were filming.
But it's amazing how much that conveys how she recognizes what's going on with the man that she just trapped in the black room, where it's like he's the fly. And in addition to that, it should be noted that this is the first time where her eyes light up with the sparkle in the mirror when she looks at herself. She's looking at herself in the eyes, and they're very lit up, and they have these sharp white dots in the middle of them.
And wouldn't you know it, those darn humans got her feeling empathy, damn it.
She's got that infectious humanity inside.
Oh man,
Gosh darn.
us humans, man, we are special. Aren't we special?
Oh boy.
Not to belittle the themes of this film, because they are powerful. I do always find that funny though in science fiction, like how special humans are.
I think we've already stressed enough that this film's a 5 out of 5.
Oh yeah, no, it's great, and any sort of fun poking at it that we do should not detract from that. But yes, she is feeling that empathy, and she releases that man from the goop. Yeah. He's not goopy when he gets out.
It just sort of it hard cuts to him wandering in this field outside, where
still in the nude.
He just has to find his way back.
Yeah.
And of course, immediately, Motorcycle Man is on the prowl.
He is aware the moment that he is out, and he is just driving at that relentlessly irresponsible Motorcycle Man speed that he does.
Terrifying.
And just truly frightening motorcycle speeds. And he goes after him, and the man finds his way home. He's climbing over the fence as Motorcycle Man seems to grab him violently.
It is amazing how well timed it is too, because he drives right up, and it's like pretty much one shot where we follow Motorcycle Man walking to the backyard
after smashing a window on a car.
Yeah, and you see right as he walks to the back, they're right there crawling through the fence is the man, and he got him. Jesus.
Yeah, and I don't like it, because I like that guy, but an especially well choreographed scene there as well. And we see an old woman looking on, somewhat confused, as Motorcycle Man stuffs that guy seemingly into a trunk. I don't believe he killed him there, but I think he was likely going back into the goop.
Yeah, and at that point, Scarlett Johansson is on the run. She's driving away.
Yeah,
she's not.
We get
she's
more
not
shots
back
of
now.
We get more shots of natural cliff sides and water and things like that. I think to denote kind of like her getting close to being more like organic and feeling.
It should be. I think going back to the eyes thing. I think that once she recognizes that she's got that in her eyes, that no matter what she does, she's going to be caught, because she knows that once Motorcycle Man looks in her eyes, he's going to see it. So,
and once again, this is utterly without dialogue. This is all inference, because
completely visually told.
Because the only plot that I felt like was kind of related was the dialogue between Scarlett Johansson and the actor we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Like that and a man she meets in a moment here are the only things that like kind of progress some plot. Otherwise, purely visual storytelling.
Well, I mean, the visuals do progress the plot. It's just that it's very wonderfully visually told.
You cannot you can't do a book report on something while you're watching this movie. This is something you need to be paying your full attention to. You can't be kind of like surfing Google and watching Under the Skin. It's not. Watch Lethal Weapon for that, which is also a good movie, but this is something that will require your full attention if you decide to dive in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a very when it comes to very visually driven movies, it's important that you can actually watch them, so you can because if you're not getting in the visuals, you're not going to be getting in a lot of story and character that is told. So.
In the next scene, Scarlett Johansson ditches the van in a big cloud of mist. Thick Scotland-y fog.
Thick with 2 C's, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Thick fog.
It is like really impressive. There we get the I think the DVD cover of her face in profile in that mist, and it's haunting. We get some very quiet moments with her in there, and then a bird flies off in out of frame.
It's just like, caw!
Yeah, no, it's we just get some bird noises. I don't know. It was weird. I thought about that, like production wise. Like, there's no way they hired a bird wrangler to wrangle a bird to make that noise
Just hold it off
on
camera,
set when they don't show the bird in that fog. So I thought that it might be interesting to see if a director even accomplished as Jonathan Glazer would use like a stock bird, or if they went to like a zoo or something.
Yeah, we should talk about the fog just a second. It's very indicative of the moral and existential ambiguity she finds herself in now. So.
Yeah, I mean that. You know, we talked about it.
There we go. There it is.
We did it. From here on, my notes on this become much more brief. The last probably 45 minutes of this sped by for me. Even this, like, several times I've watched this movie, these rush by. It's
Every
like
time. It's like 40 minutes of the movie, and it goes by very quickly.
And it felt like it rushed. Like, we watched this movie fairly late at night. I'm a night guy. The Erynn and Charlie were quite tired heading into it, and it's a slow-paced film throughout the first part. I think that everybody's energy at about this point was utterly restored.
Well, I would
power through.
I would say the cuts get faster,
Get much faster.
But I would say that the actual pacing, as far as story beats go, is slower. It's just that it feels like the more ambient shots and scenes sort of feel like they go by quicker because you're being strung along.
It feels more kinetic.
There's that. If anyone's seen the film Mabarosi, it's a Japanese film. It's sort of similar to that, with the shots of fog and like all these sort of angles from up on a hill and watching from far away as she walks around and stuff like that. She tries to eat cake at this fancy restaurant. And she takes. It's like it looks very sumptuous. It's very moist cake that she like dips her fork into it and
it
bites.
looks great.
You like in like,
this is like a kind of food porn moment.
If it was Splash starring Daryl Hannah or something, it would just be like, oh my god, this cake. But but for this, she's trying to partake in this human delicacy, and she takes one bite, and there's like a moment of pause, and then just immediately she gags and coughs it up, and one just like and just like flies out of her mouth.
I thought that was interesting. The first place she goes once she's kind of like aware of her predicament to try and like I think extract some pleasure out of the human condition that she finds herself in is to try and eat a delicacy.
Yeah, that's true.
Right before that, there is one quick scene where in that same mirror we see Motorcycle Man observing himself in it, and he does not give a shit about what he finds there. He's like, nope, that's not me. This is I am the thing under the skin. And
wrangle the four horsemen of the motorcycle league.
Yeah. Oh, they're coming up. They're coming up. I wrote down about them.
Gotcha.
Now, she begins walking down the street in what seems to be a small village in Scotland, and a man calls out to her. I've never caught what he says.
He says bus is coming in a few minutes.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, great. Well, that's. I'm glad it wasn't like a come on or anything. Yeah. That would slightly ruin the effect of what he does later.
Take your pants on. No, he's just sitting on a bench by the bus stop, and he says, bus comes around in a few minutes, and so then she goes and waits in the bus stop.
In the big glass box, which was a cool image, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Almost made her feel like she was on display a little bit.
And
a
little bit of a subtext.
She is on the bus, and the same man who spoke to her a moment before is on there with her, along with a kindly bus driver who was concerned that she was walking around in cold, rainy Scotland without no jacket, And yeah, it looks chilly. It looks chilly out there.
Not even a jacket.
Not even a jacket.
Yeah, it sounds
As
like
we continue to be racist against Scottish people.
come on, it's what they sound like.
It is what they sound like.
I'm the one that can actually understand everything that they say, and I can say that.
Yeah.
I am Scottish, please.
I wonder.
Irish and Scottish.
I'd like to someday attempt like an American caricature, like what I would think other people.
Oh
would.
my God, they're so funny. Have you ever seen a Bollywood movie, Evie? When those movies, when you watch like foreign films and they're American, they're just like so. They're just so.
I love the American
hey there.
guy in anime. In anime especially. In Yu-Gi-Oh! I remember there was this one guy in a cowboy hat with or no, not a cowboy hat. He was in an American flag bandana, and he was such a biker. And all of his cards were like the tough guy cards and stuff.
Yeah.
And he had 5 o'clock shadow. It was great.
It's there. I find American caricatures and other things very funny. It's just so.
Anyway, back to the movie. That was probably all getting edited out.
I'm sure it's very important. We talked about In Bruges earlier. That's got a good Irish look at the American, these giant balls of people walking around and just being like, I don't give a fuck.
All right. The man who was sitting with her from the bus stop asks her if she needs help. I think this is the first time that somebody's really shown empathy towards her situation instead of her being the one who takes the interest in them. And I don't think we see her response, but she is next seen entering a store with him while he's picking up a bunch of food. He does seem legitimately interested in taking care of her. They walk back to his house while she is in his jacket. She seems very interested in him. At least curious. They eat. Well, he eats. She has food in front of her as they watch a comedy show that is, to me at least, utterly incomprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
I think to display just how foreign it all feels to her.
Sure.
I mean, I had no idea what was happening on that screen. He was a very interesting, magician comedian.
Yeah. It's I don't know exactly who it is, but he wears a fez and he does magic tricks. He has this giant jar full of spoons that he magically they fly out.
Whoa!
And he speaks entirely in gibberish, just going. It's all part of the act, but separated out from the rest of an act, that does feel incredibly alien to somebody who doesn't understand the context of cultural comedy.
Yeah, I have no idea what was happening.
There you go.
She next, alone in a room, which I think is very important to the context, observes herself in the nude. Maybe understanding the context of this beauty she has a scientific understanding of for the first time. Maybe I don't know, conceptualizing that for herself, that she is beautiful.
To me, it's less about beauty and more about understanding the more nuanced function of the skin and the joints that you see.
It does linger on her knees for a weirdly long time.
Knees, elbows. It doesn't really linger on any part of her body that would be considered sexual.
Oh, I don't know. We get one quick kind of vaginal shot.
I agree, but I think it's not hey, here's a vagina. I think it's more...
It's not meant to be arousing. I'll say that.
It's more like her just sort of inspecting what she has, because I don't think she's ever really looked at the naked body before.
This is less erotic scene than many in the movie, despite the fact that we are looking at a fully nude Scarlett Johansson.
It seems to me that it's completely observational.
Yeah, but I mean, she does begin to touch her face and stuff as well. So there's some room to be read into that scene.
Self-identification, to be sure, but...
Yeah. She knows she has been appraised by most people based on their desire for sex with her.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see her interact with another woman in this whole movie. But I think she is kind of coming to try and understand what sex might mean to her a little bit.
Here, just give me a second here. We'll take a brief pause for Erynn to edit this out, but I gotta plug in the computer. Otherwise it will die.
Can't have that.
No. Goodness. It's a good thing we're almost done with the plot here.
Yeah. Alright, in the next scene, we see the League of Motorcycle Men.
Motorcycle Man!
First, we see a second motorcycle man racing off into the distance with him at very high speed, and then perhaps a third, though that might have just been another guy on a motorcycle, but he was going very fast, and what might have even been a fourth, I don't know, but the motorcycle men, they're combing the countryside.
There's a very cool shot where the four of them all split off on a different turnpike off this branching highway, where all four of them go off in different directions, and it's a very cool image that sort of shows you that they're
Getting back to that sound
spanning.
design, they just sound cool. Motorcycles sound cool, man.
Man, what an analysis.
I mean,
motorcycles sound
that's very
cool.
basic, but I'd like to make if I have good sound equipment, I'd like to make a movie involving motorcycles, because I was just, wow, man, motorcycles are awesome.
I don't think you could argue against that. They do sound cool.
And yeah, note here that was referenced earlier, I just took down there, Motorcycle Man is hauling ass, at far more than at any other point in the movie.
Yes.
Right before that, in between the League of Motorcycle Men, the man that she had been hanging out with helps ScarJo over a puddle. He carries her across it, in kind of sweet little moment. And they go for a walk through castle ruins together.
Yes.
Erynn had a few thoughts on what those castle ruins might represent. I was kind of the mind that they might just be cool ruins, and that a date is sometimes just a date. But you also had a good point that that kind of represents an immersion in culture for her a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And so that also works. I'm always a bit wary of reading too much. But anyway, Scarlett and the man are back at his home, and they engage in attempted lovemaking, and it is important to me that they more or less simultaneously initiate that, or she initiates it.
Yeah.
And he is certainly not being the aggressive pursuer in this, but nor is she being predatorily sexual as she was earlier in the film.
It's the first one that we see that feels entirely what's it? I forget. Consenting. It's the first sexual scene.
There's mutual attraction here, and they would both very much like to have sex with each other.
And they try.
They do try. She seems to be in bliss while she is being made out with. She is enjoying the moment. He clearly is happy.
I mean, it comes from a place of positivity instead of the negative sexuality we see before.
She has enjoyed his company. They are attracted to each other, and they are looking to have that very human moment.
Yeah, it plays out very humanly, where he sort of struggles when he's taking
it's a bit
pants off her
awkward.
knees.
Sex, as opposed to this crazy imagery and stuff that we've got before, in this ultra heightened vision of sexuality and power and stuff early in the movie. This is clumsy and kind of sweet.
Very, very, very stark image of it, and it is kind of endearing.
However, too good to last, as when he attempts to have penetrative sex with her, he is struggling to the point where she suddenly looks very, very upset. She shoves him off of her and goes to the edge of the bed, where she takes a lamp and observes herself off-screen from our perspective. We're looking at her back.
Yeah.
And I think the implication there is that either she does not have sex organs in the conventional sense, or is some reason why they cannot be active here that is the result of their designing of this persona for her.
Yeah, I interpreted it definitely as there's the design of like it's kind of specific. There's labia, but there's nothing underneath. There's nowhere else.
Nothing under the skin.
Oh, there's no orifice or anything like that of any kind, because she's as. This is why I always think of my theory about the structure of the film in this part, because for the whole first half she's gaining this context for what humanity is and what these different nuances are, and what she didn't really recognize their sentience at first, and then she becomes enamored by it, and she goes out of her way after she breaks free to go and try to join and experience humanity, and she can't eat cake, she can't enjoy their food, she can't keep it down, and she can't have this sexual romantic relationship that she wants because she just doesn't have anything human about her inside besides the fact that she can understand the perspective. So it just becomes this sort of cruel trick where you want her to be fulfilled by this experience, but then there's just nothing there, unfortunately.
And I think it's fair to note that it's particularly cruel that they have crafted for her this entire identity built around sexual desire, and then do not give her the ability to partake in the joy thereof.
Why would they? They never wanted it to go that far, and they're just these aliens that are there to abduct humans. It's
My last page of notes here is one giant half-page paragraph detailing the final bit of the film.
Please give us a reading.
Well, once we go back to nature, we go back to this forest. There is snow, and it is very wet. She is obviously run from the encounter with that man. We do not see him again throughout the course of the movie. She wanders alone. It is messy and it is quiet, and she is struggling in a very human way to make her way through these woods. She passes a man who warns her about how large the forest is and how easy it would be to be lost, and at some point in there confirms that she's alone here. And alarm bells just go off in everybody's head, I think, at that point. That's some fairly disturbing dialogue. There is a stone cabin which she finds and decides to rest using her big, comfy coat that she took from that other guy to rest in and use to comfort herself. And there's a gorgeous cross dissolve of the forest fading in over her prone form.
Yeah,
with the wind flowing through it.
It's almost like she's housed in the forest, and there's this very interesting unity with the earth nature.
I don't even know what the metaphor would be, but hot damn is it pretty. And she wakes up from that dreaming in terror as she is being molested by the man from earlier. He chases her through the woods as she runs for her life. And this is the one point in the movie where that same hunter theme, those screeching strings play when she is not pursuing a man, but is instead being pursued. Her power that she once derived from that sexual desire has been perverted and turned into a point where she is now the victim. He catches up and attempts to rape her. His face is horrifically impassive during this part, almost in a mirror of the way that she might have been earlier in the film. But in the course of trying to tear off her clothes, he accidentally rips open her human flesh disguise thing. Her back is open, and it is black and a bit shiny and kind of it's
sparkly. It's kind of got this sort of like grainy quality to the skin.
Yeah, but almost rubbery in a weird way that would be difficult to describe. He runs off as she slowly pulls off the rest of this disguise, culminating in her face, which she looks back at from her real form, which is that same, like, almost carved from one piece sort of obsidian statuesque form that we saw from a distance previously in the Black Room.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's really interesting to see this form because it's a very minimalist approach. I know we said earlier it's not exactly like Kubrick, but the way that Kubrick didn't
As
reveal.
we continue to bring up Kubrick.
As we reveal, it turns out it's a little.
It's a little bit like.
So like in 2001 you have the monolith, and that's a very minimalist design to an alien object. In the same way, this is a very sleek, stark midnight black visage, just completely all over. This sort of angular shoulders and hips, a very interesting design, and a very like smooth face and everything like that.
Reminiscent of Scarlett Johansson, but of course without any skin. And she looks at that face, and I believe, just like the woman earlier, it sheds a single tear, and looks rather sad at everything that is going on. But her own face cannot emote that. The man returns in a moment and splashes gasoline on her, and then immediately lights her ablaze as she runs in horror. She falls in the middle of a clearing as snow falls around her, as the flames are consuming her, and it is both gut-wrenching and oddly beautiful, like much of the rest of the film.
Yes.
And we get a shot of Motorcycle Man standing on a big, stark cliffside, looking somewhat small against the great white backdrop. His body language almost strikes me as kind of mildly regretful just for that one moment.
To me, it's more the way that he sort of like turns in every direction. It's more of just confusion of, whatever signal it was that was like telling him that she was out there escaped, now is telling him that there's no signal and she's not around anymore. So it's more just that technical like turning around and being.
It is entirely possible.
It's not there.
I like the idea in my head that events of this nature are starting to get to him, and that he has almost experienced a similar type of corruption.
Part of the cycle, sure.
Yeah,
Sure. I could see
that. Even he is not immune. But we cut back to the field, and her body seems to have been completely immolated. Scarlett Johansson is dead, and there are embers with some smoke rising to the sky as we stare straight up into it, as a million individualized little snowflakes fall from the sky, and we linger on that image with nothing but the sound of the wind for probably about a solid minute as the film comes to a close.
Then cut to credits, and the film just lets you sit with that, ruminate about it and think about it for the rest of your life.
Now, clearly we've covered a lot here. We've gone pretty into detail on this film, and I apologize if I'm making this one run particularly long.
I think it's probably going to cut together pretty well. I think that, just going through each step and analyzing each event is sort of
a shot-by-shot analysis could go even more in depth than we have here.
Definitely, without a doubt. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any takeaways? I feel like I put a lot of my own analysis of this film into that sort of play-by-play, but
Sure.
there's clearly more to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I would just poke in with my little bits here and there, but the big final takeaway, I guess, is that Under the Skin is just sort of a look at emotional depth, looking at sexual dynamics and power dynamics, and putting humanity under the microscope, so to speak, as so many great sci-fi films do. It's a very open concept, and I think you can read a lot into it just because it covers so much ground as far as the different layers of human social activity and the view of it from an outside alien perspective.
There's certainly something about it that can translate to people of all genders, certainly. But I think there's also a particularly feminist reading of this film where I would look at it and go like, this is kind of describing some of the certain injustices towards women where we put them up on this big, beautiful, very sexual pedestal a lot of the time, and we don't appreciate or even bother to understand what is underneath that. And when they try to like claim some of that sort of humanity or even like some pleasure out of like the acts of sex and stuff for themselves, we're not allowed, and maybe in some ways even vilify them. And when we see people for who they are under the skin, we're shocked and horrified, and we draw back immediately, and we maybe even want to destroy it.
Sure. Yeah. That's a very valid reading. I think it's that's definitely a perspective that I get out of it as well. So.
Yeah, and a lot of ruminations on physical beauty and humanity and perception, and I don't know. I'd love to hear what anybody else thinks about it, because this is a film worth talking about. I felt like it had a lot of buzz when it was coming out. A lot of critics that I read really, really respected this film. I was first turned onto it after that trailer, reading a 4-star review from RogerEbert.com. A lot of really good critics over there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't hear it discussed now as much as I think it should be.
Yeah, it's another one that's sort of gotten swept under the rug with a lot of highly praised independent films that come out every year. I would...
a lot of independent sci-fi that is good has been happening lately.
Oh, yeah. I would suggest checking out YouTube's Renegade Cut. He does a very interesting analysis of every film under a sort of philosophical lens, and he's got a video on Under the Skin, so I would suggest that. I can't really think of any other, but Thrasher, thank you for joining us
Absolutely.
on the podcast. It was a pleasure
100%.
for you to be here. So leave us a comment down below. Tell us what you think of the movie. If you have your own theories, or if you're interested in joining the discussion, feel free to converse below. You can reach us at the Facebook page, Gentlemen Prefer Cinephiles. We have an Instagram of the same name, and of course here on the YouTube channel, and we'll be sorting out the RSS feed so that you can listen on iTunes and SoundCloud and what have you afterwards. But until next time, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day watching movies, huh?